Japan and China, became synonymous with tea. It would take more than a century for the hundreds of varieties of handcrafted Chinese teas to once again find their way into the West. In the meantime, mass-produced teas would generate new forms and new technologies.
Tea pluckers in the Hatton district of central Sri Lanka typically earn about 125 rupees a day, or $1.20.
We now return to tea on Modern Marvels. The tea bag didn't arrive until the 20th century, but it quickly established itself as one of the iconic everyday objects of modern life. Especially in the United States, where 65% of all tea, both iced and hot, is brewed through the bag. The Lipton Tea Company alone makes some 9 billion tea bags a year just in the U.S. 90% of them here, in Lipton's blending and tea bagging plant in Suffolk, Virginia.
Our Suffolk facility is one of the largest, if not the largest, tea bag facility in the world. And if you can imagine, about 15 or 20 40-foot ocean-going containers full of tea going through that plant each week, that's the kind of volumes that we put through this facility.
Long rows of these frenetic machines punch out 1 million tea bags an hour, 24 million a day, 7 days a week. The machines make around 200 bags a minute and use an astonishing 2,500 moving parts to whip together the simple pouches.
It looks like an expensive clock that has all these moving parts, and you're standing there and you're watching it, and it's just fascinating to see all this stop and go movement in the creation of a tea bag.
Lipton tea bagging components, paper, label, string, and staples, fly through the machine with amazing precision and speed. The sides of the bags are not glued together, but folded so neatly that they hold their shape when steeped in boiling water.
The center fold is very important because if it's not a tight fold, the tea is going to come out into the cup, and that's something we do not want.
Tea bags were an accidental revolution. An American tea seller sent out samples of tea in silk pouches in 1908. Instead of taking the tea out and brewing it loose leaf style, buyers just dropped the pouches in hot water, and the tea bag was born. Eventually, the silk became gauze, and then paper. Commercial production in the 1920s added the string and tag. A big breakthrough in tea bagging technology came in the 1950s, when the tea bagging machines that Lipton still uses were first introduced. The machines were designed to create Lipton's signature double-sided or flow-through bag.
If you put 2 tea bags together, you'd get more tea flavor. Well, that's the idea behind our Lipton flow-through bag.
And Lipton converted their entire operation to manufacturing that bag, and it vaulted Lipton by far to the #1 position in the marketplace. And the advantage of this tea bag was that you actually created 4 sides for the tea to be exposed to water, and it created more space in the tea bag for the leaves to expand and to brew properly.
Lipton's newest generation of tea bagging machines is 3 times as fast as the older models. This one, which shoots out 600 bags a minute, is used to bag Lipton's green and specialty teas. The technology, meanwhile, is racing to keep up with the changes in the traditional tea bag, like this single-serve stick from the Serengeti Tea Company in Los Angeles, and roomier pyramid bags that can hold larger pieces of leaf. Shooting tea into small pouches is the culmination of a long process for mass-market tea manufacturers like Lipton. Tea tasting is at the heart of that process.
Yep, that's okay. P code 70.
That's because most Lipton teas are actually blends made up of dozens of individual teas. Making sure those blends have consistent flavor, color, and mouthfeel requires constant changes in the formula and constant tasting.
The reason we have to keep tasting to maintain that taste is every tea garden can make a different type of tea every week. The quality of the teas can change according to weather, according to how well they plucked the leaf and how well it was rolled. So it's almost like a juggling act. You know, you're constantly changing the formulas to keep consistency.
Lipton's classic orange Peco tea is made up of between 40 and 60 teas. Lipton has devised a numerical code from 1 to 7
Then we'll call it a 4.2 on mouth.
that it uses to describe the attributes of teas.
And maybe a good astringent. So for our mainstream blend, we try and keep around a taste score of, you know, say 4.4. We try and keep a very high color or hue score of maybe 6.8, and we'd probably try and keep a medium mouthfeeler thickness score of around 4.8. It's fairly thick, so about a 5.2.
Tea tasting is a skill that requires 4 to 5 years of intense training. John Cheatham served his apprenticeship in Sri Lanka, where he tasted as many as 1,200 teas a day.
It's a bit like learning to play a musical instrument. The more you practice, the better you get at it. And the more you practice, the more you're better to pick out different types of tastes. And in the end, you're able to pick out the best teas that'll fit in the Lipton blends. When we're tasting, we suck in the tea at around 100 miles per hour, and that's so you can oxidize the tea and break it up into particles, and also spray it around to different parts of your mouth, because you're tasting different things with different parts of your mouth.
Lipton's ever-changing blend sheets are programmed at company headquarters in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, and then downloaded into the computerized blending system at Suffolk. Vast quantities of tea from around the world are processed here every day, vigorously sifted to remove impurities, and then funneled into massive silos.
A typical silo here will hold about 10,000 pounds, and we'll go through that in a 24-hour period, and we have multiple silos on site.
Some silos hold just a single tea, while others hold a pre-blend of 3 to 4 teas. The silos themselves initiate Lipton's blending process by swirling the teas together as they fall through the conical end. Conveyor belts carry the teas from the silos to this blending machine, which gently tumbles the day's recipe. The blends are then conveyed to 2,000-pound super sacks that feed the tea bagging machines. Not all the tea in America is processed into tea bags. About 1/6 of it is converted into powder, which is used to make instant tea, and also is part of fountain and bottled tea blends. Lipton and other major manufacturers produce and sell $400 million worth of tea powder each year. The powder is made in processing plants that brew tea in a large vat, then pump it up and spray it into the top of a tower that can rise up 100 feet or more. High temperatures in the upper part of the tower instantly vaporize the water in the tea, leaving a tea residue, which crystallizes as it descends in the cooler air. Tea powder and tea bags are frowned upon in much of the world, including China and India, where many people still drink tea loose leaf style. Traditional drinkers insist that the directly infused leaf puts more flavor in the brew. But sometimes you can have too much of a good thing. Welcome to Celestial Seasonings and the overwhelming power of peppermint.
Darjeeling tea, grown in the foothills of the Himalayas, is a light and subtle tea that can retail for hundreds of dollars a pound. It is known as the champagne of tea.
We now return to tea on Modern Marvels. Every year, Celestial Seasonings uses 500,000 pounds of freshly picked peppermint and spearmint in its popular herb tea blends. This is where it's stored, in the mint room at the company warehouse and factory in Boulder, Colorado.
The mint room is very intense. It'll go to your sinuses, your nose will start dripping, and your eyes will start watering. Some people can just stick their head in, and then they have to leave. And in fact, a very popular t-shirt we have for sale is, "I survived the mint room." We had to double seal the walls and the ceilings of this because the oil was so high that it would leak through and contaminate the rest of the herbs, so everything would be tasting like mint.
Mint is just one of over 100 herbs that Celestial Seasoning stocks in mega quantities for its various blends. A dog might go insane wandering these warehouse aisles, stuffed with everything from cinnamon to ginger to vanilla bean to licorice to lemongrass. The herb tea giant revolutionized the American tea industry in the 1970s with the introduction of feel-good botanical blends like Sleepy Time and Red Zinger. Many of the blends were made entirely of herbs. They didn't contain Camellia sinensis or tea, and they introduced consumers to a medicine chest of plants that could reputedly do everything from prevent a cold and soothe a sore throat to fire up your sex drive and settle your nerves. Hibiscus, the herb that puts the zing in Red Zinger, is imported mainly from Thailand and China. Celestial Seasonings uses 1 million pounds of it a year. Before it can be blended with other ingredients, the raw compacted hibiscus, like all the other herbs that Celestial uses, has to be broken down into pieces that will fit into a tea bag. The first phase of milling is done by hand.
What that individual is doing is breaking it down into consumable units, if you will, so that it doesn't back up within the internal mechanisms of the machine. That individual is also doing a visual inspection of the ingredients, so any foreign material that would be present in the ingredient before it would go through our process, we're pulling that out.
The herb is further broken down into smaller but still coarse pieces, and then conveyed to a cutter mill, where the real chopping is done. Here, the hibiscus falls onto a shaft embedded with 7 3-inch high and 1-inch thick blades that rotate at high speed. The shredded hibiscus is then sucked through the system into a gyrating sifter that holds 10 screens, each one with a finer mesh than the one before.
We want it to be real consistent because if we have large particles and smaller particles, the infusion rate's going to be different for all of those particles.
After milling, the herbs are blended and then funneled to Celestial's tea bagging machines. Because these tea bags don't have strings or tags or staples, these machines are a lot faster than those at Lipton, flinging out upwards of 1,000 tea bags a minute.
It's a pretty intricate web that goes through the machine that will seal the 2 sides of the tea bag paper that actually has adhesive together. The sealing temperature is quite high, upwards of about 150 degrees centigrade. And so that's important to us because a consumer is putting boiling water on top of a tea bag at 100 degrees centigrade. We want to make sure that that bond is going to stay intact throughout that entire cup of tea.
Celestial Seasonings pioneered the herb or hippie tea revolution in the United States in the late 1960s. The first herbs were picked in the wild from fields and meadows around Boulder. Weeds for needs was one of the company's early slogans.
They wildcrafted it right here in the Rocky Mountains, and then they had to figure a way to dry it and a place to dry it in so it wouldn't be rained on. So they used somebody's barn and another person's garage. And then they stuffed it into muslin bags by hand and put little strings around it and then took it to natural food stores.
Early reaction from the tea industry, which revolved almost entirely around traditional black tea, was dismissive.
I remember going to a tea company in just south of London, England, and their manufacturing manager allowed me to tour their whole facility saying, "You're no competition to us." And I think they think a little differently now.
Indeed, herbal and flavored teas now account for over 1/3 of tea bag and loose leaf sales in America. Celestial Seasonings alone sells over $100 million worth of blends a year, most of them entirely herbal. But one botanical with great taste and remarkable medicinal value remains the original Camellia sinensis, or tea. It's been valued as a healthy potion for millennia, and new research indicates that it might turn out to be a pharmacological treasure trove of health benefits and cures, which may explain why tea is finally giving its old rival Coffee, a run for the money.
By excluding string, tags, and overwrap on its tea bags, Celestial Seasonings eliminates 3,617,000 pounds of waste each year.
We now return to tea on Modern Marvels.
Put down that cup of coffee. It's time to spill the beans, and it's time to pick up a cup of good health, one cup of tea at a time.
That's the mantra in trendy tea places like the Botanical Herb and Tea Garden in Beverly Hills. Tea consumption doubled in the U.S. between 2001 and 2006, and more people are making tea their drink of choice. That's largely because of the reputed health benefits of tea. Research suggests that tea plays a role in the prevention of obesity, osteoporosis, gum disease, and heart disease. Especially green tea, which was nearly impossible to find in the U.S. 10 years ago, and now accounts for 19% of the market. Green tea is packed with antioxidants that many researchers say prevent cell damage and slow down the aging process. But the number one antioxidant in green tea, a single molecule called EGCG, or epigallocatechin gallate, may have other beneficial properties.
We were exploring chemicals that had been derived from Chinese herbal medicine and asking whether any of these chemicals could attack cancer-causing proteins. And sure enough, for one of the cancer targets that we were very interested in, we found this chemical from green tea that binds very tightly to this cancer protein and inhibits its activity.
EGCG, which makes up about 70% of the dry weight of tea, neutralizes BCL-XL, otherwise known as the anti-death protein, a gene that doesn't allow cancer cells to die.
The anti-death genes become hyperactive, and this allows the cancer cell to expand, to increase its numbers, because they've forgotten how to die. The same mechanism explains why it's often very difficult to kill cancer cells, even with the best weapons we have, such as chemotherapy and radiation.
Researchers used nuclear magnetic resonance, an advanced version of medicine's MRI, to get a picture of how a single molecule of EGCG interacts with a single molecule of the anti-death protein family. Dr. Maurizio Palecchia was in charge of the research.
This is the protein that, when overexpressed in cancer cells, prevent them from dying and allow them to proliferate. In red here, we have this small molecule. This is epigallocatechin gallate, which, even being very small compared with the protein, is able to insert itself on this deep crevice on the surface of the molecule and block its activity.
Conclusive research on the cancer-killing benefits of green tea remains to be done, and it's unclear how much EGCG is actually in the kind of processed green teas on sale in most stores. Still, Dr. Reed is convinced that a little green tea every day can't hurt.
You've got antioxidants, you've got the detoxifying effect of the chemicals, revving up our own detoxifying systems, and then you've got the direct effect against cancer-causing proteins. So why not take a chance?
Which is exactly what people are doing at places like Dr. T's Herb and Tea Garden. There are over 100 varieties of tea here, green as well as black, oolong, and herb, most of them imported from India and China in small batches.
The Japanese couldn't produce a lot.
Unlike mass-produced teas, which aim for consistency, the very inconsistency of these teas, the fact that they vary from harvest to harvest depending on climate, soil, and even the style of plucking, is what makes them intriguing to devotees. And pricey. Dr. T's menu ranges from $4 to $300 a pot. This tea, called Tai Ping from the Fujian province of southern China, was once reserved for Chinese royalty and was served to Richard Nixon during his historic visit to China in 1972.
This plantation produces, it's in its entire year, 150 kilos, 300 pounds of tea, and that's it. I was given 14 ounces. One of my most prized teas right here.
Dr. T's most prized tea, however, is this one. It's pu'er, a category of Chinese tea that, like wine, improves with age. That's because of a processing method that's been a Chinese state secret since the 14th century, which enables the leaf to develop a mold as it ages. And that mold protects the tea and ripens the flavor.
You can see here how the blue is that little bacteria that grows on the tea cake. And it's that bacteria combined with the chemical pH balance of the tea that provides this tea cake with the most delicate nose, the most delicate palate of sweetness that you have never experienced. Oh my.
Pu'ers have sold at auction for as much as $40,000 per cake. Dr. T's 1952 Pu'er sells for nearly $1,000 an ounce. But tea aficionados may not entirely feel the pain, because tea, according to Dr. T, is the only plant on Earth that has a stimulant, caffeine, and a tranquilizer, something called L-theanine. That makes the tea buzz totally different from that of coffee.
The caffeine stimulates the beta brainwaves, the fight-flight response. Your body goes into a state of shock with caffeine. It's ready to take care of a perilous situation. L-theanine, secreted into the brain, stimulates the alpha brainwaves, relaxed, focused, meditative energy. Tea has it, coffee does not.
No pleasure is simpler, no luxury cheaper, and no consciousness-altering substance more benign than our simple tea.
You want to be ceremonious about tea making, there's certainly tea for you. You want something to quench your thirst, there's tea for you. You want something to keep you up working, there's tea for you. There's nothing else on earth like it.
Which may explain why the 5,000-year-old drink of emperors has become the preferred drink of humankind. Not only does tea have a unique ability to wake up and calm, like wine, the best teas have an extraordinary range and subtlety of tastes. Whether tea time represents a moment of tranquility in the stampede of life, or an inexpensive Epicurean thrill, the human thirst for this benign and inscrutable drink promises to deepen for millennia to come.